Echoes of the Shadow Realm.
A family migrates to a small town in the Philippines and transfers into an ancestral home, hopeful for a new beginning in life. The house, however, has a secret sooner or later to be unraveled. The house is a portal to the spirit world where evil beings are awaiting their chance to pass on to the world of living. The youngest son, Marco, strangely starts acting peculiarly and slips into a comatose state that doctors cannot explain. Desperate, the family resorts to a local spiritual healer, who reveals that Marco's spirit has been caught in an evil realm, his body used as a vessel by a strong demon, wanting to break into the physical world. The family now must venture into the spirit world to rescue Marco before the demon can fully possess him, but they will soon find out it is more terrorizing there than they had ever imagined. The Santiago family finally arrived at the outskirts of a quiet town surrounded by dense forests, San Roque. It was a dusty, old, Spanish-era mansion that he had inherited from his distant relative. The house looked sort of imposing yet eerie, its walls almost fully hidden by crawling vines, and the windows blinded by dust. The children ran up and down the great hallways, exploring every nook and cranny, excited to be living in a haunted house. Every step on the old wooden floors creaked, and the walls, with the wind, seemed to whisper. Thus, the family really started settling into this ominous home, anxious to make it their own. That night, over dinner, Marco mentioned casually the strange noises he heard in the attic, soft humming, like the lullaby some woman would be singing. The reason provided by Carlos was that it was simply the wind, but Liza felt a shiver go down her spine. It was an old house, and it was quite easy to imagine the creaks and groans of aged wood during nighttime, but something in Marco's innocent remark unsettled her. Later, as the family was preparing for bed, Liza happened to glance at an old painting which hung in the hall. It was a woman in a white dress. Her face was cast in shadow. For one reason or another, this painting filled her with a sense of trepidation, but she merely shrugged her shoulders. As night fell, the house almost seemed to come alive. Shadows coursed over the corners of rooms, and a very soft, mournful lullaby whispered through the halls. Marco, sleeping in the attic room, began to turn and twist, his face contorted into fear. Whimpers burbled through his lips as he slept. His parents, carefree, swaddled in the forces of darkness pulling on their strings, were fast asleep in their room. The next day, Marco was abnormally silent, wouldn't play with his sister, or show interest in exploring the house as he did. Instead, he just sat at one corner, looking into the wall with his small hands clamped onto a worn soft toy. Liza noticed there must be something wrong with her son and began coaxing him out, but Marco kept really aloof and vacuous, his blank eyes seeing nothing. Time passed, and Marco's condition began to worsen every day. He began telling her about nightmares. Some dark place full of shadowy figures, whispering his name. A woman in white singing to him, drawing him deeper into the darkness. He got concerned and shared the fear with Carlos, who comforted her, saying this nightmare also came because of the stress due to the change of house. One night, Marco just woke up screaming. His eyes were wide with terror, clutching onto Liza, begging not to let the woman take him. Liza clutched him close to herself, her heart pounding with fear. She decided she would take Marco to a doctor, but that visit yielded no answers. The doctor could find nothing wrong with him physically, blaming his anxiety for the behavior. But Liza knew something was grossly wrong. Marco, once vibrant and full of life, now reminded her of a ghost shadow from his former self. The house, oppressive, drawing energy out of his fear. With each night passing by, the lullaby was getting louder, and with every passing day, the shadows growing in this house were getting dark. Elena, too, finally began to feel that something was wrong. She heard whispers in the night and saw flashes of movements in the corners of her eye. The old mansion no longer charmed her but began to feel like her prison, and the family was caught inside with her, unable to leave the rising darkness. Liza could not rid herself of the feeling that, with all these happenings, some kind of malevolent entity was at work here. She began researching any history the house might have to find a continuous run of tragic events associated with the residents' people who had lived there turned mad, disappeared, or died under mysterious circumstances. It was said that the house was cursed, a passageway in the spirit world, where the souls of those condemned wandered unrestricted. She summoned the help of Nena, a local spiritual healer claimed to communicate with spirits in a last-ditch effort to save her son. Nena listened to the narration of Liza and finally agreed, feeling the powerful dark energy surrounding Marco. That night, Nena did her ritual in the attic where Marco's nightmares first started. She prayed and burned some sacred herbs, and in doing so, the coldness filled the room as the shadows seemed to want to close in on them. Nena's voice shook as she announced that Marco's spirit was caught in the shadow realm, a dark dimension ruled by a very powerful demon. She explained that the demon had chosen Marco as a vessel with which to cross into the physical world. This lullaby was actually a spell to pull the spirit of Marco further down into the shadow realm, where the demon would be able to take complete control of his body. To save Marco, it would be necessary to enter the shadow realm and bring his spirit back before the demon could fully possess him. And so, Carlos, Liza, and Nena prepared to make the hazardous journey into the shadow realm. Nena told them that the realm was one of nightmares, while the boundaries separating reality and illusion were not quite clear. The shadows could deceive and entrap them, and the demon did not stop at anything to prevent them from rescuing Marco. Holding hands, praying, the space around them imploded into black. The only reality was a macabre version of this house, walls dripping with blood, air heavy with decaying stench. The lullaby resounded through halls, deeper into the heart of the shadow realm. With every step, the group pressed further down the twisting corridors of the shadow realm, closer to Marco and closer to the demon that sought to keep him. Grotesque distortions now occupied rooms once so familiar within their home, full of horrors. The walls stared back at them with faces distorted in weird, impossible ways, and their floors slicked with something foul. As they went deeper and deeper into this pit of the shadow realm, they encountered the souls trapped within from the very beginning, lost spirits who gave into its darkness. The souls stretched out to them with hollow eyes and voices full of despair, but Nena kept them fixed, egging them on. It was in the darkest corner of the shadow realm that they finally found Marco, who sat crouched in a ball, surrounded by a circle of shadowy figures chanting in some tongue. The woman in white stood at the center, her face now visible, demonic, with eyes that glowed with malevolence. Its possession, and Marco's body in the physical world was about to become its vessel. Desperate and angry, Carlos lunged at his son, but the demon lashed back, sending him across the room. Liza screamed as Nena stepped forward with a talisman emitting an unbearably bright light. She started chanting in a very strong, determined voice. The demon shrieked in anger. Its form shifted and writhed in efforts against the light. The dark figures surrounding Marco vanished, and the little boy looked up into the room, his eyes wide with fear. Liza reached to him, calling his name, and Marco struggled to his feet, moving to his mother. But it was by no means vanquished, and it marshaled all its strength for one last assault, beginning to swell to an even more hideous and frightening form. The ground opened beneath them, disclosing some dark abyss whence hands were reaching up to drag them down. Howling Nena had poured all her energy into the talisman. It shone brighter and brighter until the light filled the whole room. The shrieks from the demon grew loud, piercing, consumed by the light, disintegrating to nothingness. With one final burst of energy, Howling Nena closed up the rift to the Shadow Realm and sealed the demon away. The darkness receded, and they were back again in the attic of their house, as if the prevailing atmosphere of terror had lifted. Marco was lying in Liza's arms, his breathing shallow but even. The relief exploded in a storm of tears from Carlos and Liza as they clung to their son. Howling Nena was exhausted but triumphant, assuring them that the demon had left and that the spirit of Marco was finally free. The experience, however, had left its mark on the family. Marco was never quite the same. He spoke little of his experiences in the Shadow Realm, and the cheer that once dominated his demeanor now had a quiet sadness clinging to it. Even the house seemed to remember what had taken place within its walls, which still whispered the soft echo of a lullaby. Eventually, the family of Santiago moved away from that house and allowed it to disintegrate into its loneliness. They tried to return to normal life, but events in the Shadow Realm had changed them forever. Now they knew that the veil between the living and the dead was thinner than most dared believe, and at times the darkness could actually reach out and touch the light. Years later, long after the Santiagos had left and were forgotten from San Roque, another family entered the mansion. As before, in the middle of the night, the lullaby was heard, and the shadows moved that did not belong to anybody. The cycle started again, and although defeated, the demon was quite patient. It was going to wait, hidden in the obscurity of shade until another soul was found which it could take possession of. And so it stood, the house, a gateway to the darkness, where nightmares came to life, and the shadows would never quite die.